Welcome to the Happy Pepper channel. David here, and I'm going to take you step by step and show you how you can build this 6-pod aeroponic garden for about $40. Let's dive in. Before we dive right in, I want to take a minute to go over this aeroponic garden with you to familiarize yourself with the various components. We're going to start out with your standard 5-gallon heavy-duty tote. The tote is outfitted with a water level gauge. I have a zip tie at the 2-gallon level, one at the 3-gallon level, and as luck would have it, that 3-gallon level takes us right to the bottom of our 2-inch net cups, which is where you want to be. Taking a look at the top of the unit, we have our 6 grow sites, one in each corner, one in the back, one in the front. We also have a 2-inch net cup that has a cloning collar in it. That's there to keep light out and to be used as an access port to check pH and top off your nutrient solution. The system does include a cloning port. So if you wanted to propagate a cutting, this is where you would do it. Now, 2-inch net pots are not only 2 inches across, they're also 2 inches deep. So when using the cloning port, you want to make sure that your cutting is at least 3 inches long from the top of the collar here, so that your stem is sitting in the nutrient solution. You'll also want to make sure when you're propagating a cutting that you're keeping an eye on your water level and always topping it off and making sure that it's staying up to the 3-gallon level. In the middle, we have our 6-port manifold with our irrigation line going down and feeding each of the 6 grow sites. Turning the system around, you can see we have our submersible pump power cord and our air stone line neatly coming out the back. So now let's see what's under the hood. So under the hood, we have our 75-gallon per hour submersible pump. This particular pump does have a water flow on it. You can turn it down to reduce the flow, turn it up to max or anywhere in between. We have our irrigation lines coming off of our manifold, going out to each of the 6 ports. And then we have our air stone line that's coming through the top into the reservoir as well. Let's go over the parts and tools we'll need for this project. We'll need our 5-gallon heavy-duty tote, 8 2-inch net cups, 2 of the neoprene collars. We'll need our submersible pump. For this, we're using the EcoPlus 66. The pump I mentioned earlier pumps 75 gallons per hour. I've been using it for the last couple of years on various projects, and it really works out well. The pump comes with some adapters. We're going to be using the 1/2-inch adapter. We'll need a 5.5-inch length of 1/2-inch irrigation tubing, a 1/2-inch grommet, our 6-port manifold. The manifold is the Rainbird FPT 6-port manifold. We need a 1/2-inch threaded connector. We'll need 6 10-inch lengths of 1/4-inch irrigation tubing, 8 1/4-inch grommets, a 6.5-inch length of 1/4-inch inner diameter, 3/8 outer diameter clear vinyl tubing, 3 zip ties, a 1/4-inch elbow, 6 1/4-inch cable clamps, 6 vinyl screws and hex nuts. We'll need our air pump, airline tubing, one-way check valve, very important, and a medium air stone. For our tools, we'll need a drill, a 2-inch hole saw, 5 30-seconds drill bit, 11/16 drill bit, 3/8 drill bit, a utility knife, a razor blade scraper helps, scissors, PVC cutting tool, a great tool for cutting your vinyl tubing. You get a nice straight cut on the end with little effort. You'll need some Teflon tape, plumbing tape, and some Aquarium silicone sealant. You may or may not need this. So let's get started. Start with our reservoir and installing our water level gauge. The first thing that you'll want to do is measure up 1.5 inches from the bottom of the tote on a flat section of the tote. I have mine right here in the corner. Go ahead and drill a 3/8 inch hole and insert your grommet like you see here. Now I went ahead and did this ahead of time because on the example that I showed earlier in the video, this grommet did leak. So I took it out, I put a little bit of the Aquarium silicone sealant in the groove of the grommet, put the grommet back in, cleaned it up a little bit, and set it aside. The directions on the silicone sealant says that it will cure in 48 hours and to allow it to cure before you fill it up. So I did that, and now we're ready to go ahead and put together our water level gauge. Now, for that, you'll need the 90-degree elbow and our vinyl tubing. So it helps to have a cup of hot water when you're working with your tubing and these connectors. Simply put the end of the tubing in the hot water for about 10 seconds. You don't have to put it in very long. And go ahead and slip on the tubing to your elbow. See how nice and easy that goes on? Now you'll notice that when I put this on the elbow, I put it on so that the tubing curved and will curve toward the reservoir. That's what you want. Now just install it. And there we go. Now we're going to wait until the end of the project to fill it up. We'll put 2 gallons in, then we'll put our zip tie on. We'll put another gallon in and put our other zip tie on to mark our 2 and 3 gallon levels. So now we'll work on the back side of the tote where our pump electrical cord and our air line will come out. So what we'll want to do is, using your utility knife, you're going to want to cut out the plastic here. You want to be careful when you do this. Really don't want the knife to slip, end up in the emergency room. That would really ruin your day. That was a close one. There we go. So you end up with that. Okay? Now, using your 3/8 inch bit on your drill, you're going to drill your hole for your power cord to slip through. So you'll go down a little bit. You're going to end up cleaning it up with your utility knife. Try to center it and drill your hole. Now we'll go ahead and cut this out. Okay. Now our power cord will fit right through there nicely. That'll do it for the tote. Now we can direct our attention to the top. So we're going to mark where we're going to drill our 2-inch holes for our grow sites, for our cloner, and for our water fill. So looking at the completed project, you'll see that for the 4 corners, we're simply going to drill here, 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 and here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want to center it right here in all 4 corners. Likewise, for our front, here, for our back, here. Here's our cloning site, here, and here we're going to split the difference for our water fill. So we have all of our marks for where our 2-inch holes are going to be. Now we want to make a mark in the center for our manifold. Now, just for ease, I shoved these 1/4-inch grommets in where the irrigation tubing is going to come off the manifold, just to make it easy to mark where to drill my holes. I am using a different colored marker. Then lastly, we'll need a hole for our airline tubing, and then that will go right here. So our center hole is going to be cut with our 11/16 drill bit. Our irrigation lines will be drilled to 3/8, as well as our airline. So I'm going to go ahead and drill all these holes out, clean them up using the utility knife and perhaps the scraper, and come right back. Okay, so now that all the holes have been cut and cleaned up, I've gone ahead and installed the grommets. The one thing we need to deal with before we move on to assembling the manifold is our cloning site. You'll see that when the net cup sits in there, it sits up high like that. We don't want that. We want it to sit flush with the recessed part of the cover. So there's a couple of different ways to handle that. You could simply use your utility knife and knock off these pieces here on all 4 corners. I did that on the other unit, and you can see that I had a little problem with it. What happened was, when I simply cut them off using the utility knife and I slipped the net cup in there, there were some spaces that would allow light to get through and into your reservoir, and we don't want that. So what I ended up doing was I took out my soldering iron, and with some scrap pieces of the cover from drilling out the holes, I kind of just melted some in place to build it up a little bit. The neck cup does now fit in there nicely, flush, and no light gets through. So how do we handle that? Well, a couple ways. You can either use a heat gun and heat up the plastic, bend it down when it's pliable, and then go ahead and finish with your utility knife to make a nice circle. Or you can use what I'm going to use, which is my soldering iron, and just kind of heat it up that way, melt it down, push it down, and clean it up. So I'll go ahead and do that and be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and I knocked down the 4 corners of the cloning site with the soldering iron. It doesn't look real pretty, but when you get the net cup in there, you really can't see it. The main objective is that no light comes through. While my soldering iron was hot, I went ahead and knocked off the bottom of 2 of the net cups. Otherwise, you would just use a pair of scissors. That's where your neoprene insert goes in. And you can see it fits nice and flush against the recessed portion of the lid. Your grow sites sit up a little bit higher. It's exactly what you want. And now that we've got that done, we can go ahead and get started on assembling the manifold. I put some Teflon tape on the threads of our 1/2-inch connector coupler. We'll go ahead and screw that into our manifold. You may not need the Teflon tape, but I think it's just a good precautionary measure to help prevent leaking. So the next thing we'll do is go ahead and connect all 6 of our 1/4-inch irrigation tubing. Really don't need the hot water trick on this. This tubing is flexible, but unlike airline tubing, it is a little bit thicker and a bit more rigid, and we're only going over 1 barb on the manifold as well, so it slips on fairly easy. I mean, if you wanted to use the hot water trick, you certainly could. Okay, with our irrigation tubes installed, we can go ahead and slip our manifold through the center grommet. Now you may be asking, why the grommet? Why not just drill a 1/2-inch hole, and why not just drill 1/4-inch holes for our lines? Well, with the pump running, there will be some water splashing in addition to the air stone as the bubbles are coming up and popping. The underside of the cover will get wet. So serves a couple of purposes. One, for it to prevent leaching up through and ending up with a wet cover. And secondly, it also helps to keep the light out of your reservoir. With the manifold installed, we can now go under the hood and attach our lines. We're going to attach our lines using the cable clamps. First thing we'll want to do is put our line through the clamp, line it up. We're going to be attaching these clamps to the high part of the underside of the lid. Make your mark, and that's where you'll drill your hole. I'm going to go ahead, mark out the 4 on the corners, drill them out, install the clamps, and come back and show you how we'll deal with the front and back grow sites. With our lines run to our 4 corners, now we're going to work on running our lines to our front and back grow sites. Pretty straightforward. We'll take our line, we'll go under, and we'll be positioning it like so. So we'll have our cable clamp that we will attach right like that. We'll do the same to the other side. I'll drill the holes. We'll use our nylon screws and nuts to attach our clamps, and then we'll move on to the next step. So here's what it looks like when all the lines are attached. The next step is to go ahead and attach our pump. So we'll start with our 1/2 inch tubing. I'm going to heat this up. I've got a cup of piping hot water here. I'm going to heat it up for 10 seconds. And it goes on very easily. Kind of twisting it, almost screwing it on. So the next thing we're going to do is attach our pump. So I am going to heat up our tubing here. While that's heating up, I did find a heavier cable tie I had on hand. The smaller one will work just fine, but since I do have a larger one, I'm going to use it. So one of the reasons I'm heating this up is because I want this vinyl to be nice and pliable so that when I attach the pump in the zip tie, it'll have a nice snug fit. Now at first, I'm attaching the zip tie to the top part of the pump adapter. I'm going to give it a good pull so it's got a secure fit. Then I'm going to try to slide it down towards the pump, like so. So what you end up with is a very nice snug fit there. I'll get some scissors, snip this off, and at this point it's time to start assembling the unit. Okay, a couple of things before we go ahead and fire this thing up. As I was assembling it, I noticed that I had to make the hole in the back of the reservoir a little bit deeper to accommodate the power cord so that the lid would close properly. Secondly, I did go ahead and fill it with 2 gallons of water. I put my 2-gallon water level gauge zip tie on, put another gallon in, put the other zip tie on. The water did come up to the very bottom of the neck cup, which is what we want. Another thing to keep in mind, that when you drill out your 2-inch holes for your grow sites, you may want to hang on to these, clean them up, and if you decide to use this system to germinate seeds, it's very nice to have one of these. They fit perfectly right on top of your net cup, perfect for germination. Another thing is nice to have more of these cloning inserts on hand. That way, if you have plants that are not quite ready to go into the system and you have others that are, you could simply pop it in. That'll keep the light out. I'll go ahead and put everything that you need to build this system in the description below. This grow light may look familiar to you. This was my do-it-yourself $30 grow light that I put up in my very first video on the channel. I'll go ahead and leave a link to that in the description as well. So with that, let's go ahead and fire this thing up. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please leave a comment below. I do like the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like notifications of when I release my next video, please hit the bell button. Thanks again for watching and happy growing!